Okay, so for you time travelers that are going to go back into the past and expect to fit in so that you are not noticed, some of these books we're going to be showing you, you're going to need, just like in H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, where he goes back and he grabs a certain amount of books and then goes back forward in time to the time of the Morlocks. Well, this is related to that, only on the technical side. So you're going to need this book, which is General Shop Metalwork, and this one is, I believe, published in 1936. Now, yes, 1936. Now, the dress code back then is a little bit different. So here's an example of what you're going to need. You're going to need, let's say you're working in a metal fab shop, and you're making different things you're going to need. You notice that the correct attire for metalwork back then is you have to be wearing a necktie. So just be aware that the t-shirt and jeans is not going to cut it, or you will stand out like a sore thumb. But this is a good book to take with you. Some of the other books you're going to need is a tube manual. You're going to definitely need a tube manual. Depending if you don't go back too far, you're going to need a older semiconductor data library book. And if you're in around the theater business, you're going to need to learn about these old theatrical spotlights. Depending what time, you can make sure that you learn about the ones of the period you're going to travel to. We did the one episode on the carbon arc light. That's a little older than these, but still. Yeah, and you're gonna have to learn about carbons, but you're gonna need some knowledge of this stuff. Now we're gonna go out to the shop, and we're gonna look at some more books that you possibly should study or take with you when you time travel back in the era of the 30s through the 50s. Okay, here are two more books that wouldn't be bad to have. Electronics for Photographers, 1966. And another book that will help you is How to Make Paper Flowers and Party Decorations, copyrighted 1947. So you will have some other knowledge to have with you when you go. These are again for mid-20th century time travel, but they have valuable information in them. Okay, the other thing, if you happen to wind up working in a television broadcast situation, it would be highly advantageous to learn how to operate a Eastman Telesin machine. These are a unique machine. They're an intermittent-driven 16 millimeter projector, and they have a synchronous motor that runs the intermittent and a regular AC induction motor that runs the rest of the projector, so that you're running exactly 24 frames per second off the synchronous motor, but there's this little gear assembly with some slop in here so that the projector does not get the intermittent does not get out of time with respect to the rest of the drivetrain. Learning how to thread and operate one of these would be very valuable in a time travel situation where you find yourself working in a television broadcast facility. Okay, when traveling in time, do not, under any circumstances, take your smartphone or any digital camera. You're going to encounter things like this. This is a 16 millimeter film magazine that is loaded with 16 millimeter film, and you put this in the camera, and this is where your little short motion pictures come from. So you may encounter this. There's an aperture that opens up after you've inserted in the camera. This goes towards the lens. It's driven by a little gear from the camera. And this is the kind of thing you're going to have to learn to use and have experience with when you go back in time. And just to make sure you understand, do not take your smartphone or your digital camera, or you will definitely be out of place. And they will know where you're from. And you will be an outsider. Okay, here is a Simplex Super with an RCA sound head that Brent and I assembled on the base a couple weekends ago. This you may encounter if you become employed as a projectionist in a theater. So you're going to have to learn how to thread them and operate them. Some of them even have a place for a manual crank in case you need to hand crank the projector for silent movies for whatever reason. It could be very useful. But then in that case you won't use the sound head. And the sound head will use a photo tube, which is under this cover right here. There's your photo tube. That's where the sound is picked up. There's a little slit and a lens, and the light source comes from this exciter lamp over here, and it's shined through this lens through a little slit, and it winds up getting reflected into the photo tube. That's your sound pickup. Don't talk about solar cells back then because they won't know what you're talking about. Tubes are where it's at. But this is a Super Simplex. They made a lot of them. This one is a regular Simplex, which is made prior to that. Also on an RCA sound head. Over here, we have another famous machine called a Simplex E7. The Simplex E7 is a very common projector, and it is similar. You have Brinkert projectors, so familiarize yourself with the operation of many of these as you can, and you will be running a carbon arc lamp house. Don't mention xenon, or that's a tip-off that maybe you're from another time. So just remember, and this one has the mirror out of it, but like the video we did before with the carbon arc lamp house, this one is auto feed. You don't have to continually manually trim it because you have to make sure you have enough carbon in there for 20 minutes of film, or the audience will notice when the screen goes dark and you'll have to very rapidly change carbons, and that's not good. Here is a Century projector, single shutter machine. They made a double shutter machine, and this one also has a photo tube and the exciter lamp. Familiarize yourself with as many different types of projectors as you can if your intention is to go back in time and be a projectionist. It's actually a very fun job. There's a lot of things to know before traveling in time. You can't just arbitrarily go somewhere and fit in. The other thing you may encounter are patch panels that use the dual foam plug. And they use them in phone companies, they use them in studios, and you can patch audio signals around with them. There's a more modern version of a video patch panel that the Trompeter Electronics makes. We'll cover that in another video, but these are pretty straightforward in how they work. So you shouldn't have any trouble with this kind of stuff when you encounter it at either a telephone company or in a studio setting. There was a period in time when the US had 50 cycle power. So if you have a time machine with a high mass transport limit, You could take a motor such as this with you just in case you needed it, or you may encounter a motor like this. And don't be shocked because it's only got a 50 cycle rating, not 50-60. This was common. You may encounter a telephone circuit line jack, which has a spring-loaded cable that you can unplug or you can uncoil and plug in to a jack to connect the line. You don't want to connect it to itself, that doesn't do any good. But this is another thing that may be, it's hard to do this with one hand, that you may encounter for interconnecting telephone lines in case somebody calls you and wants to talk and you're sitting at a switchboard. So that is something that is doable. And here's another device that we're in the process of testing, which is a 16 millimeter full coat record play electronics that you may encounter for recording and playing back sound that is synchronous to motion picture film. Usually this and the projector will have a Telesin interlock so that they remain locked. It's another thing that you may want to understand when doing time travel. Then you have the tube electronics for your Eastman Telesin machine. This should be pretty straightforward on operation. You will probably have to acquire yourself a tube tester somewhere along the line because you will in fact have to deal with vacuum tubes. That's a certainty. There's quite a bit of that stuff around here that we can cover in future videos. This is the original photo tube. See, there's the photo tube preamplifier for the Eastman projector. So you got a couple of 12AX7s. It looks like 3 12AX7s going on here. And this mounts right here where this solid state unit is in the solar cell, which you will not encounter when traveling back to the era of this. And contactors you will probably run into, mostly older contactors than that. Knife switches, rheostats, transformers, both audio transformers and power transformers, RF transformers. None of the transformers you will encounter in any of your time travel will be Autobots or Decepticons, so don't expect to find any. Okay, in time travel you will encounter a number of types of transformers. None of those choices include Autobots and Decepticons. You will have power transformers that are typically 60 cycles in to some voltage out. You got here's another type. This is a neon sign transformer. That's a step-up transformer. You have audio transformers, such as this Peerless 448Q, S448Q. That's a common one. That's a very high fidelity audio transformer. You have power transformers that give you the usually 120 in, and you have your high voltage winding for your plate supply and then your filament supply. This one is a power supply that should run the exciter lamp, hence all the filtering, so you don't have hum in the audio. And we do not have any RF transformers here, which you would find in a radio transmitter shack or similar. But that's basically going to cover the transformer information you will need to know, the types of transformers, so you can identify them and troubleshoot when traveling back in time. Okay, when traveling back in time and you've got to do something that requires what we now use a Dremel for, do not ask for a Dremel. That's a dead giveaway that you don't belong, and somebody might catch on you're a time traveler. What you have is a device. This has a rotating shaft in it that's hooked to a motor, and when you turn the motor on, the grinding wheel spins, and you hold this end and do your grinding. Okay, in time travel, it's not appropriate to mention LEDs because you won't find them and nobody will know what you're talking about anyway. So you're looking at basically a 6977 tube, and you put a row of them on a circuit board with the end of them facing the front panel, as you can see here by this picture. Then the end glows when you turn them on. They're a directly heated triode with a filament, a grid, and a plate, so that when you apply a positive voltage to the plate with respect to the filament, then the neon gas inside the tube will glow, and you will see it.
Well, it's grid controlled, right?
Yeah, it's a grid-controlled triode with gas in there. This is what you're going to have to use when building those things with lots of blinking lights, because you won't be finding any LEDs, and don't take any LEDs because they may think you're a witch and burn you or weigh you to see if you weigh as much as a duck.